This next article that I want to cover with you is the New York Times becoming a parody of itself. This is Limousine Elite Liberalism 101. The Democrats are at their weakest point since the 1920s. They can't afford to spurn Wall Street. I wasn't kidding when I said this is like the New York Times being a parody of itself. Imagine thinking that. By the way, Douglas Schoen writes this article, and shocker, he worked in the Clinton administration. Wow. Democrats are at their weakest point since the 1920s. They can't afford to spurn Wall Street. Have you considered that maybe they're at their weakest point because they haven't spurned Wall Street? Okay, let's try to keep our calm as we go through some of this piece. Many of the most prominent voices in the Democratic Party, led by Bernie Sanders, are advocating wealth redistribution through higher taxes and Medicare for all and demonizing banks and Wall Street. Pause. Perhaps that's why he is literally the most popular politician in America. But I digress. Memories in politics are short, but those policies are vastly different from the program of the party's traditional center-left coalition. Under Bill Clinton, that coalition balanced the budget, acknowledged the limits of government, and protected the essential programs that make up the social safety net. President Clinton did this, in part, by moving the party away from a reflexive anti-Wall Street posture. It's not popular to say so today, but there are still compelling reasons Democrats should strengthen ties to Wall Street. As the party has left behind that version of liberalism, it has also found its way to its weakest electoral position, nationally and at the state level, since the 1920s. Hillary Clinton's lurch to the left probably cost her Midwestern states that Barack Obama had won twice and led to the election of Donald Trump. Okay, pause. I fucking told you so. I told you they were going to do this. Hillary Clinton runs a corporatist, centrist, sellout establishment campaign. She gets beaten by Donald Trump, and their conclusion was it wasn't corporate or centrist / right-wing enough. It needed to be more in favor of the status quo. You know when Donald Trump bludgeoned Hillary over the head with the fact that she gave those speeches to Goldman Sachs? Remember that? Well, according to this jackass, the problem was she wasn't close enough to Goldman Sachs. She wasn't close enough to Wall Street. She didn't give enough, $600,000 speeches or $300,000 speeches or whatever they were. That's the problem, according to this guy. And notice how he fudges the facts. I'm going to read this one more time. He says, as the party's left behind that version of liberalism, Bill Clinton's version, it has also found its way to its weakest electoral position. Whoa. Nonsense. It's been with that ideology that they're now at the weakest position. This guy acts like Bernie Sanders was the last Democratic president who was elected, and that it was under Bernie Sanders that we had the loss of 1,000 Democratic seats. It wasn't Bernie Sanders. It was Obama. It was President Obama. Guess who lost to Trump? It wasn't Bernie Sanders. It was Hillary Clinton. So your version of liberalism, your Democratic Party that you want, is the one that already exists, and it's been wiped out from coast to coast. And you're fudging the fact and saying, oh, it's these goddamn populist leftists who believe in Medicare for all and whatnot. Well, if that's so unpopular, why does it poll at fucking 60%? And why do even more Republicans support it than don't support it? I don't know if he's lying or if he's just the world's biggest idiot. But let's continue. Democrats should keep ties with Wall Street for several reasons. The first is an ugly fact of politics. Money. Maintaining ties to Wall Street makes economic sense for Democrats and keeps their coffers full. In the 2016 election, the Center for Responsive Politics reports employees and companies in the securities and investment industry donated more than $63 million to the Democratic Party. Pause. Again, that's the problem. He's not making connections when they're right in front of him. Hey, Democrats raised a shitload of money from Wall Street. Oh my God, they lost. Well, I guess the problem is they didn't raise enough from Wall Street. No, the problem is they raised money from Wall Street. It's one of the biggest problems. And then to bring it up, like, this is the problem with neoliberals and corporatists. They never question the framework of the system. If something already exists, we must rationalize it and work within that context. No, this is why Bernie Sanders is the most popular politician in the country. He dares to question the fundamental underpinnings of the way our society works. And he goes, this could be bullshit. So when he says, hey, money's just a fact of life, what are you going to do, man? This is what our politics is run on. It's an ugly fact. So he calls it an ugly fact. So presumably he's saying, man, isn't it fucked up that money seems to run our politics? But then he goes on to say, well, I guess we got to give into that and try to sell out more. No! The answer is, let's try to get money out of the system. Let's try to get clean elections. And before you give me that bullshit tripe of, oh no, it's just, that'll never happen. That's exactly what people said about women getting the right to vote before they had the right to vote. That's exactly what people said about ending segregation in the South before we ended segregation in the South. So spare me your "it's not possible" arguments, because that's been made 1,000 times before, and every time it's been wrong. With enough pressure and enough of a movement behind it, of course we can get it accomplished. And by the way, that is the answer to get our politicians to be more accountable to us and not to be accountable to corporations and Wall Street, is to get the money out of the system and have clean elections by law. For the 2020 election, some of the party's strongest potential presidential candidates, Senators Cory Booker, Kirsten Gillibrand, and Kamala Harris, as well as Deval Patrick, the former Massachusetts governor, should not be dismissed simply because of their current or past Wall Street ties. If voters really hated ties to Wall Street and financial elites, Republicans would not enjoy such a commanding electoral position or have elected a New York plutocrat president. Most voters' major problems with President Trump stem from his performance, not from his wealth or connections to Wall Street. Pause again. He's deliberately fudging the facts. One of the main reasons Donald Trump won is he portrayed himself as more anti-establishment and more anti-status quo than Hillary Clinton. Remember how everybody was saying he's kind of populist? Because he was kind of populist. When he's railing against TPP and he's railing against NAFTA as he did, he's railing against outsourcing jobs as he did. When he says, I'm going to rebuild our infrastructure, why are we wasting all this money overseas in these wars? As he did, those are populist positions. So in other words, how many times did he say in the campaign, I'm self-financing my campaign? Now, by the way, that's not true. He didn't actually do that. But when he argued that, people heard that and they go, oh shit, maybe he's not beholden to the billionaires. Maybe he's not beholden to the elites. So that's one of the main reasons Trump won. If the establishment GOP that really was open about its close ties to Wall Street was popular, perhaps Mitt Romney would have won. But he didn't. And he didn't because it was too obvious. Whereas Donald Trump did run a populist campaign, even though that was just a veneer and he's selling out like nobody's business. But that was one of the main reasons why he won. And notice, he's like, well, the Republicans are, they're winning, so obviously it can't be Wall Street ties, can't be the big thing. Notice, man, Republicans run as unapologetic Republicans. Democrats run as Republican light. When you give the American people the option of Republican or Republican light, they always choose Republican. But when you give them the option of a Republican or a populist leftist, the populist leftist wins. And also, this guy's, he's not giving enough credit to just how much Republicans lie. So, yes, a Republican can win an election if he talks about how he's going to cut middle-class taxes. And so, I want you to keep more of your money. The Democrats don't. That's a lie that he's saying that, but that's a message that can fucking win. It resonates. That's also a version of fake populism. So, maybe Republicans win when they talk about that stuff and not when they go out there and brag and say, I'm super connected to Wall Street. Donald Trump did not do that, and that's one of the main reasons why he won. A second reason Democrats should keep ties to Wall Street, despite what the Democratic left says, America is a center-right, pro-capitalist nation. A January Gallup poll found that moderates and conservatives make up almost 70% of the country, while only 25% of voters identify as liberal. Even in May 2016, when Senator Sanders made redistribution a central part of his platform, Gallup found that only 35% of Americans had a positive image of socialism, compared with 60% positive of capitalism. Okay. Herein lies the biggest lie of this piece. Now, let me, again, be fair and say, I don't know if he's lying or if he's just super ignorant or if he's an idiot. But what does his poll say here? His poll is about what? Labels. So you talk to somebody, and you've all experienced this, I've experienced this. You talk to somebody, yeah, you know, I'm a center-right kind of guy, I'm moderate, I'm kind of conservative, I'm a centrist. So yes, when you poll the American people and you ask them about labels, it turns out that at the moment, being a centrist or being moderately conservative, it turns out that that's more in vogue. And people would label themselves as that. But guess what? What he doesn't tell you is people who describe themselves as conservative, who voted in the Democratic primary in the Midwest, overwhelmingly voted for Bernie Sanders. Wait, what? So it turns out people don't know dick about labels. And they call themselves conservatives, but when they listen to Bernie Sanders rail against Wall Street and rail against the elites and talk about Medicare for all and talk about free college and talk about raising taxes on the rich, they go, I agree with all that. So hold on, you describe yourself as conservative, but you agree with all Bernie Sanders' proposals. That exists in the world, and it exists in the U.S. in large numbers. In large numbers. Furthermore, this could be on purpose that he's using the more obscure polls, the vague polls that reference labels without showing that the American people have any fucking clue what the labels are. Guess what? When you go to the specific policy issues, which is what really matters here, 60% of the American people, 61% actually, want a Medicare for all system. Even more Republicans want it than don't. 58% of the American people want free college. Wow. 80% of the American people want to raise the minimum wage. Only 17% of the American people still want to be in Afghanistan. And that was as of, 2013 or something. So we're years beyond that. That number's probably like fucking 10% now of the American people that say, okay, sure, let's stay in Afghanistan. 58% of the American people want to legalize marijuana. You go down the list, the American people, if you go by the issues, they are unquestionably populist left. Not a doubt about it. But he cites the vague, misleading, obscure poll that's obsessed with fucking labels, which is the lowest form of discourse you can really have. How would you describe yourself? I'm a nice guy. That's what I am. 89% of men describe themselves as nice men. What the fuck does that mean? Doesn't mean anything. Are you actually nice or are you not? Same thing with this. I'm moderately conservative. I do love Medicare for all and free college and a living wage and all these things that are populist left, but I'm moderately conservative. It doesn't mean anything. So he's citing these numbers that don't mean anything. When you go issue for issue, the American people are populist left, and he does not address that fact. Okay? And finally, he says, this was evident to Democrats in the 1990s. From 1996 to 2000, for example, Democrats led the way on two key economic legislative victories. First, the Telecommunications Act of 1996 deregulated the communications and cable industries, increased growth, and enhanced market competition. Second, the Financial Services Modernization Act of 1999 removed regulations placed on financial institutions by bureaucrats and expanded opportunities for Wall Street to engage in mergers and acquisitions, adding wealth to the retirement accounts and other investment portfolios of millions of middle-class Americans. Bullshit. If the party is going to have any chance of returning to its position of influence and appeal, Democrats need to work with Wall Street to push policies to create jobs, heal divisions, and stimulate the American economy. This is like, again, remember I introduced this story by saying the New York Times, this is the New York Times being a parody of itself with their limousine liberalism. Look at what he's championing as Democratic accomplishments. These are some of the biggest Democratic failures in modern history. The Telecommunications Act that deregulated the communications and cable industry. That's what led to the consolidation that we have like fucking 5 mega corporations that control the narrative in mainstream media. Everybody hates the mainstream media. And they hate the mainstream media because there's a consolidation of power, so you have wealthy elites hiring people that push their narrow worldview. And he's bragging about this. So remember when Bill Clinton did that? Man, what a success it was to deregulate the cable industry and make it so that wealthy elites control more of the narrative. He's bragging about that. And then he goes on, the Financial Services Modernization Act of 1999. You know what that is? Massive, gigantic, tremendous deregulation, which in part led to the Great Recession in 2008 and is continuing to lead to the bubble that we're in right now because we never recovered from all the mass deregulation going back from Reagan, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Obama to an extent too, but mostly Reagan, Clinton, and W. Bush deregulated the shit out of the American economy. And ever since then, what have we had? Giant boom-bust cycles. There was a period when Glass-Steagall was implemented, after during the Great Depression. What happened? We had a steady financial system and steady banking. Slow, but consistent growth. Second you got rid of those regulations, I mean, you had giant boom-bust cycles over and over and over. We're still going through them now. It's because of deregulation like this, and he's bragging about it. And he's saying, well, wasn't it great when the Democrats did these things that crashed the economy and ruined people? We've had a slow decline of the middle class in America for the past 40 or 50 years. And this guy's saying, let's go back to the good old days of the 1990s when Bill Clinton was continuing that war on the middle class. And by the way, most of the good things that happened under the Clinton administration, you can credit to the tech boom. Oh, we had a balanced budget. Yeah, because there was a giant tech boom. So this guy, he's got no clue what the fuck he's talking about. He's ignorant or he's a liar. And if the Democrats go down this path, as they're poised to do, they will get obliterated. Which is why Justice Democrats is the answer. We're the Bernie wing. We're the populist wing of the Democratic Party. No corporate money, no PAC money, no fucking ties to Wall Street. JusticeDemocrats.com/fight.